So happy to be here, Wakeji, on Reflections by Wakeji. Let me tell you, first of all, I'm not going to laugh as much as she laughs, but it doesn't mean that I'm not happy. I think we all express ourselves differently, and she loves laughing, but it's a pleasure. I remember when she came to me and told me that she wanted to do this Bible chapter by chapter, and I was like, really? How does someone do that? But you guys, she has powered through 5 books. And for any pastor who covers the book of Numbers and Leviticus and comes out of it like that, as in, we just give it up for her. I am here to take us through the book of Joshua, and today we are in Joshua chapter 1. And this is a chapter that has been read from. You know, there are those like stories in the Bible that you have heard countless times. You have heard the story of David and Goliath, the story of Jesus walking on water, the story of Lazarus. You know, I think this chapter actually matches to those Bible stories that have been read so many times in churches. And I normally say, like, those are the most dangerous Bible stories ever, because you assume the lesson before you even read the story. So I don't want us to assume today. I don't want us to assume any lesson whatsoever. But I'm not going to read Joshua chapter 1 I'm not going to read it like word for word today. I'll just say that this is the orientation chapter for Joshua. Moses has died. In fact, the way it starts in verse 1, it says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give to them and to the Israelites. I think that it's in Deuteronomy 31 that we first get God telling Moses that he's going to die. It is in Deuteronomy 31 where we first get introduced to, God telling Moses that his days are over. But the difference between Deuteronomy 31 and Joshua chapter 1 is that in Joshua chapter 1, Moses is dead. Like, he's been dead for almost like a month and is buried. And if there's anything that signifies to us, if you're thinking about it the way I was thinking about it, there's an era that has ended and another one has begun. The era of Israel being led by Moses is over. The beginning of Israel being led by Joshua is here. There's a change of regime. I think at the point where we are at as a country, we understand that pretty well. I don't need to get into detail about that. And I find that there are 2 things to get from that. And I feel like my number one lesson, I think the one that I picked from those 2 verses is that it's interesting to see that the purposes of God will outlive all men. It doesn't matter who you are. Like, Moses was a hero, man. Moses was a man who used to go up the mountain and talk to God. God spoke to him and he wrote the 10 commandments. Moses has written like 5 books in the Bible, but still he dies. The purposes of God will outlive all men, and that shouldn't get us scared. I think it should get us to a point where we should do our bit honorably. Like, just do what God has called you to do honorably, because that's the purpose of God that you're serving in your generation. And that the excitement of it, the excitement of serving that purpose is that at the end of it all, you leave a legacy and you hand over to someone else. But that's not even what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about today is I want us to enter into Joshua's boots, into Joshua's shoes, into Joshua's moment of he's taking over from Moses. And in my mind, I'm thinking like Moses was this figure. He's the one who's led the children of Israel for all these days. And then here comes some guy called Joshua. My goodness. Like, if Moses is the person you are taking over from, if Moses is the person who set the bar for you, I really feel it for Joshua. And as I was thinking about this chapter, I feel like if there's anybody who had the right to have that thing we call the imposter syndrome, by the way, it was Joshua. You are taking over from a guy called Moses. You're taking over from a guy who's helped the children of Israel do so much. They've crossed, lakes have been, seas have been dried for them to pass through. And this guy who's called Moses has been their leader all along, and then comes Joshua. Here's the thing that I wanted us to get from today. That all of us are in the point where every once in a while you're going to be at the start of something that is so scary for you. You're going to be at the point where you're starting out either a season, you're starting out either a venture that looks so intimidating to you. But if Joshua might have felt intimidated at that moment, he needed to remember that in Exodus chapter 3 verse 11, Moses was as intimidated by the task in front of him as he probably might have felt at that moment. And that's for Joshua. In Exodus 3:11, when God asks Moses to go and get the children of Israel, Moses looks at himself and he says, me. Yani, you are sending me. And he starts giving reasons. I can't talk. Oh, this and that. Do you know who you're sending me against? And what did God tell Moses at that point? In Exodus chapter 3 verse 12, God told Moses, I will be with you. I will be with you. And these are the same words that we come and find God telling Joshua here. That I will be with you, just as I was with my servant Moses. Those words are as comforting to Joshua, as comforting to Moses as they should be comforting to you if you are at the beginning of something that is scary to you. Or you're in the middle of something that looks like it's such a Herculean task. And you're like, how will I do this? I love it that God comes alongside and comes and says to you and I that I will be with you. That's the assurance of God. He says in verse 3, I will give you every place you set your foot. In verse 5, no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. Verse 5 again, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Those words must comfort us. Those words must give us the courage to stand and go. But God asks of something from Joshua. He asks him to be strong, and it appears in verse 6, it appears in verse 7, it appears in verse 9. God asks Joshua to be strong and courageous. In verse 7, he asks him to obey the book of the law. God's assurances are accessed to us in radical obedience to his word, not in a liberal disregard to it. So yes, God promises that he's going to be with us, he's going to walk with us, but there's something he demands of us, of you and I. He asks us to be strong and courageous, and then to obey the word of God, the book of the law. And then he promises in verse 9 that if we do that, we will be prosperous and successful. That is how this chapter plays out. God has his part, and his part is that he will be with you and I. But we also have a part. We have to be strong and courageous. God can't promise you that he's going to be with you and then you sit at home and cross your legs. He's expecting that you step out and start taking up some radical steps towards whatever it is he's called you to. And then his promise to be with you will accompany you. And then if you do that, and you do that in accordance to his word, he promises that you will be prosperous and you'll be successful. That is Joshua chapter 1, and I hope it encourages you to step out, to go and dare greatly in what God has called you, because he is with you. God bless you, and have a successful and an amazing day. Bye.